Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, May 14th, 2021, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the 2016 Senate election results and the 2010 Senate election results with an emphasis on the 2016 ones to get a better understanding and general idea of what to expect in 2022. Now, the Senate elections in 2022 will be of utmost importance considering that every single seat will matter. The Democrats nor the Republicans can afford to give up a singular seat as it would dramatically shift party control or partisan control in the United States Senate, meaning that the Democratic Party currently, while in the majority, if adding an additional seat or two, would be in a much better position in terms of passing major pieces of legislation than they are currently. And looking at the Senate election results in 2016, I think we will get a very different understanding and more broader view of some of these states, considering that some of them do actually hold some different election results currently. For example, Georgia and Arizona are two states that had Republicans elected back in 2016, but both of those seats were vacated due to the very unfortunate passing of John McCain in Arizona, and then Johnny Isakson retiring his seat early in the state of Georgia because of health reasons. So, if we're looking at 2016, understand that Arizona and Georgia were under different circumstances. But it's still worth to take a look at, just worth to look at every single state because it will matter for 2022. We need to understand all of the impacts of, all of these incumbents and the popularity and the former winning rates, winning margins to get a better depiction of what to expect in 2022, because I can tell you that every single thing matters, and if an incumbent was winning before, chances are that they probably are winning again. Now, to show you the 2022 Senate map, one thing you do have to understand is that there are no Democrats who have announced that they are retiring currently. All of their retirements have been from Republicans, and those are in the states of Ohio with Rob Portman, Pennsylvania with Pat Toomey, North Carolina with Richard Burr, Alabama with Richard Shelby, and Missouri with Roy Blunt. So those are the 5 retirements we've seen so far. If you're wondering, are there going to be any Democratic retirements? I expect one from Patrick Leahy in Vermont, but there's no guarantee on that. I also expect one from Chuck Grassley in Iowa and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. But again, no guarantees on any of those 3. So I'm going to remove those for right now. So far, we know there are 5 GOP retirements. So that pretty much puts the Republicans also in yet again another vulnerable position, because that means that we don't really need to focus too heavily on the margins of victories for some of these competitive incumbents, meaning they come from competitive states. Obviously, it wouldn't really matter, if there was an incumbent or not in Alabama. The Republicans probably going to win regardless. Probably the same thing in Missouri, but in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and North Carolina, it really could make all the difference. And in 2016, Missouri was surprisingly competitive. Ohio was surprisingly not, in hindsight, not necessarily at the time. But just looking at 2022, I think we can get a general idea of what to expect from 2016, but keep that in mind when we're looking at those 5 states. Keep them on your mind: Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Alabama, and Missouri. I'm honestly not going to cover Alabama, so take that out of consideration. So let's go through all of the swing states, all of the competitive states, pretty much what matters for 2022 and what we might expect, whether a similar result or a drastically different one. The first state I want to take a look at is the state of Nevada, in which Catherine Cortez Masto defeated Joe Heck, I believe is his name, by 2.4%. This was the same margin of victory for Hillary Clinton, the same margin of victory for Joe Biden in 2020. So 2.4% seems to be a surprisingly popular margin for the Democrats in Nevada. Now, Catherine Cortez Masto was actually filling a seat from Senator Harry Reid, for a long time their Senate Majority Leader and the representative for the Democratic Party, the same way Chuck Schumer is today, both in the majority and in the minority. Before Chuck Schumer was Minority Leader or Majority Leader, it was Harry Reid. So he retired in 2016, and Catherine Cortez Masto took his place. Now, we can expect a roughly similar result in 2022. Looking at Nevada in off years or in regular election years, typically speaking, it leans towards the Democratic Party. It reminds me a lot of North Carolina, with very few exceptions of voting in the opposition party's favor, but is almost always characterized as a swing state, yet voting history won't always be characterized, won't always be there to show you the same exact result. Nevada almost always votes with the Democrats on the national level. The last time it went to the GOP was in 2004, 2000 prior to that, but then also went to Bill Clinton twice. After Obama consistently went to the Democratic Party in statewide elections, local elections, Senate elections, presidential elections. There was a Republican senator in Nevada, but pretty much, depending on what type of year it is, Nevada almost always leans towards the left. There are a few exceptions, and in this case, we're not going to see a Republican incumbent. We're going to see a Democratic incumbent who will have that factor on their side and will likely win the state of Nevada. In addition, if we're moving down to Arizona, keep in mind John McCain was a very popular incumbent at the time. He won by double digits. I mean, he was a well-known name, well-known nationwide, well-known within this state. So I understand why he won by such a large amount. But the fact that John McCain and Cindy McCain are censured by the Arizona GOP and their strategies for victory are shunned and ignored really goes to tell you and show you why the GOP lost both Senate seats in Arizona and why they're on track to lose the governorship in 2022. And all 5 of those House races that really matter. So Arizona, a state that, the Democratic Party has made significant gains in over the past 5 years. Arizona could have been avoided going such dramatically different path than what was expected of it when Donald Trump was elected, solely if they had not shunned away the more anti-Trump Republicans, considering that many of those that are deemed anti-Trump, some of them aren't even. For example, Doug Ducey has never really been anti-Trump. He just certified his state's electoral votes. Pretty much, if you replicate the strategies of those candidates, you will win. But since the Arizona GOP has been so afraid to do so, they're probably not going to win statewide elections just because they don't want to. Michael Bennet in the state of Colorado, he's probably going to win re-election by a large amount. Looking at the 2020 election results, there's no way I look at that and say Joe Biden didn't do as well as Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden could have done better than this. This was a 13.5% margin. It was an absolutely astounding margin, one of the largest for Democrats in decades. So Colorado certainly had a very strong response and a very strong voting group for Joe Biden, and I largely expect that to translate for Michael Bennet in 2022, as it did for him in 2016 with him outperforming Hillary Clinton in the state. He won by 5.7, she won by 4.9. If Biden's winning by 13.5, what's to say he might not win by 14.9? You never know. Things can be different, but I don't think it's going to be 14.9, 14.7, 14.5. I think it'll be somewhere near double digits, potentially double digits, but it'll probably underperform Biden just given the circumstances of the year, but still, overall win it. So we pretty much know how Colorado and Nevada are going to go, but Arizona I did want to point out because the Arizona GOP has been so afraid to try to adapt the winning strategies of John McCain and Doug Ducey and Jeff Flake, because these are 3 Republicans who have been censured by the Arizona GOP for their outward opposition to President Trump, or just because President Trump doesn't like them, for the case of Doug Ducey. And pretty much the only Republicans who have been able to win statewide in Senate elections and in governor elections have been shunned. And I think that largely contributes to why the Arizona GOP is having such a tough time at fielding the right candidates, winning statewide races, winning in House elections. They don't use the strategies that work because President Trump doesn't like them. With Kelly Ward as the Arizona GOP chairwoman, the GOP is inherently screwed in Arizona because their strategy is built on a failed candidate in the state. So, moving beyond the state of Arizona, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other competitive states. Iowa, where Chuck Grassley won by over 25 points back in 2016. This is an interesting state, or actually right around 25 points, right around there. I don't think actually above that, but that's not the main point. Chuck Grassley won by a very large amount in the state of Iowa. He won almost every single county. Yes, you heard me. Almost every single county. And if you're just looking at the margin here, this is why there's a lot of expectation from some Democrats that he will retire. He would end out on a high note. He's getting very old. He wouldn't be rejected by the voters or have any sign that he would be rejected by the voters. So pretty much, even if he does decide to run, let me speak correctly really quickly. If he decides to run, he will probably win re-election. I don't doubt that. But I do think that rather than win a re-election bid and then have to retire early like Saxby Chambliss, that's very different than if he just leaves immediately and doesn't open up the possibility of an open Senate race 3 years into his term, 4 years into his term, 5 years into his term, because that special election will eventually have to occur. And likewise to Georgia, he might be trying to avoid a potential Democratic pickup. So while he may ensure a Republican victory in 2022, he might be setting them up for failure in the future because another Republican could take his place. In Wisconsin, yet again, another competitive state. I think Wisconsin will be amongst one of the more competitive states. If you're looking at Wisconsin with its history in the 2020 election, it was close. Went to Joe Biden by 0.6%. Looking at the 2016 election, it was pretty close as well. Ron Johnson ran against a rerun candidate. What do I mean by that? This candidate ran in the Senate election for this seat prior, so in 2010, returned in 2016, Russ Feingold, lost again to Ron Johnson by a narrowly larger margin, but still a larger margin regardless. So Ron Johnson won, but he didn't win by an astonishing amount. I mean, we're talking about a margin of 3.4%, so he was still able to win, but not super significantly enough that I would say if he decides to run that he would have this incumbency factor that would be too much for the Democrats to overcome. the margin in Wisconsin was exceptionally close, and I think it does need to be pointed out. Likewise in Pennsylvania. And it actually puts the GOP in an even worse position because even with an incumbent, he only won the state by 1.5%. If you take out the factor of the incumbency, some people might be more inclined to vote for a Democrat in a state that just voted for Joe Biden rather than vote for another Republican in that situation. So Katie McGinty might not be that Democrat in 2022, but another Democrat such as John Fetterman or Connor Lamb could end up winning the Senate race because the incumbent is retiring and because of its narrow amount in 2016. The 2016 results in both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania told you immediately that in 2022 they would be swing states. And that's what I wanted to get at. That the results were very clear about what will be a swing state in 2022. And while there were some exceptions, Arizona and Georgia certainly being one of them or two of them, besides that, I will say that, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were easily predictable swing states for 2022 based solely off the 2016 election results. And going over to the state of Ohio, another retiring incumbent state, Rob Portman, won by over 20 points in this state, 20.8%. Now, that's a very large margin for a swing state, but he's out. So this means Ohio might return to its traditional competitive nature. So might Iowa. We don't exactly know, and we don't know what type of year 2022 is going to be. But based off the election results in 2016, you would assume that the states are safe are, but knowing that Ohio has a retiring incumbent, I'm not going to work under the assumption that Chuck Grassley is at this instant, but for the case of Ohio, a state that was safe Republican for this one incumbent might not be safe Republican for another one. So this, combined with our knowledge that he's retiring, actually might give us a general idea of what type of margin to expect. It's going to be large for the GOP. It's going to be a GOP victory as it stands currently, but the margin probably won't be nearly as momentous as 20.8%. At most, double digits. And or 10 to 15%. And then let's go ahead and move down to the South. North Carolina, another state that you could probably pick up on as a swing state based off the 2016 results. Looking at Richard Burr's result, he received 51.1% of the vote. Now, Deborah Ross received 45.4%. So this is a margin of nearly 6 points. So there was a lot of crossover support in the state of North Carolina. But then in 2020, Donald Trump significantly reduces his margin of victory in North Carolina, winning the state by only 1.3%. If you're looking at the election results in 2016, well, Richard Burr certainly did better than 1.3%, but also keep in mind that Donald Trump had won the state by 3.4%. So when he's outperforming him by around 2.6%, that is impressive. But, comparing it to the 2020 results, he probably would have only won by 4 percentage points, which means that without the incumbent, yes, the GOP is certainly favored in North Carolina. I'm not going to deny that. I just think that it will be more competitive than if the incumbent was there, and that it could be within 1 or 2 percentage points, or potentially even closer than that. Moving down to Georgia, this is the Johnny Isakson seat. This is the race that was won by double digits, very similarly to John McCain. Now, the thing about Georgia is that this is a race that was not supposed to happen in 2020. When Raphael Warnock ran for that Senate race, that race was not supposed to happen. What happened? Well, essentially, Johnny Isakson decided that he would rather retire from the United States Senate than serve out his term just because of health reasons, saying that that was his most important factor when making this decision. So pretty much, he retired early because of his physical health, because he did not want to, have a similar situation to other senators in the past. So it was a respectable decision, but it did prompt a special election, which also might be in the mind of Chuck Grassley, that he doesn't want to have to leave a seat open and leave the Senate after being reelected by a large margin, prompting the Democratic Party to have an opportunity to pick up the race. So while 2016 might have been a narrow indicator that, Republicans can do well here, it was because of the incumbent. He won a large percentage of the black vote. We will not see Republicans replicate such type victories in the future, at least as it stands currently. The Democratic Party is in a position where they have a strong grip on people of color. They've been able to do so for the past decade. Johnny Isakson was an exception. There are no exceptions in Georgia as it stands currently. So he was able to win by a large amount, but don't expect this type to be, the margin of victory for the Republicans in 2022. And then looking at the state of Florida, this is the final state we're going to be looking at. We'll briefly skim over Missouri, and I'll briefly go through the 2010 results. Marco Rubio won by 7.7%. He won by a very, very large amount, and, this was nearing an 8-point margin of victory. So Marco Rubio did phenomenal, and he will likely do very well, possibly even better in 2022. Rubio's popular. He wins a large portion of the vote down in Miami-Dade, down in Monroe County, down in Broward County, a large portion relative to where Donald Trump gets his vote. And, Marco Rubio will have a strong grip on minority voters the same way he did in 2016 and 2010. So Rubio seems to be set for 2022. 2016 election results could have told you that as well. And then in Missouri, close, but Roy Blunt is now retiring, and with a traditional type of Republican, I don't expect Missouri to be as close as it was in 2016. Certainly not a 2.8% margin in this state. So pretty much, we get a general idea of what the swing states are going to be / were going to be ahead of time. A few things that do deviate from the 2016 results: Ohio, Iowa, Arizona, Georgia, all different than what we expected due to the fact that Ohio has a retiring incumbent. The Georgia and Arizona now have 2 Democratic senators in these exact Senate seats, and Iowa might have a retiring incumbent. We don't know entirely what's going to happen in Iowa, but for the rest of it, it seemed to be very predictable. Some of the states did a little bit better. New Hampshire, actually, a state with Maggie Hassan winning by 0.1%. Can't believe I almost forgot to mention the state of New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan won here by 0.1%. Joe Biden won the state by 7 points. Hillary Clinton won it by 0.2% back in 2016. So if she has to replicate the Biden margin, she would win by 6.9%. But chances are, with Chris Sununu potentially running, that she will face off a very similarly close election, potentially a defeat. But based off the 2016 results, you also could have grappled that just based off those results. So 2016 gave us a pretty general understanding of what to expect in 2022. Obviously, a couple of exceptions. Years do change, but I think it just provided a little bit more insight on what to expect in 2022. And like I said, we will briefly go through the 2010 election results. And I also do want to point out that they might actually tell you exactly what we were expecting. If you're looking at the big board, while some of these states may be surprising that West Virginia went to the Democrats, there was a popular incumbent. He's out. I think that was Rockefeller in that Senate race. If you're looking at, I think that More Capito took West Virginia, so let's see who it was. Oh, it was Joe Manchin. I don't know why I didn't realize that it was Joe Manchin, because that was a special election. That was not a regular election. I was wondering why, because I thought that Joe Manchin was up in 2012, so I kind of eliminated him. But then I realized there was a special election. So besides West Virginia, you didn't really see too many surprises on here. Colorado leans towards the Democrats. Close. Probably won't be the case in terms of being close, but still leans towards the Democrats. Illinois, obviously very different circumstances now. Nevada, same type of story. Pennsylvania narrowly went to the Republicans as well in 2010 without that incumbent. For 2022, without that incumbent, might lean back to the left. Washington was surprisingly close. That's no longer a close state. So pretty much you can expect very similar results to both 2010 and 2016, just with a few incumbents changing around, a few different forms of support across the country that do change coalitions, but 2016 was a pretty good indicator of what we might expect to see in 2022, and I really do want to compare the results after the election, because chances are they might be very similar or a little bit different, but it probably won't deviate much from this exact map that was decided on November 8th, 2016. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.